many a poor boy, and God, I know I won. My mother was a tailor. She sewed my new jeans, and my father, he was a gambling man down in New Orleans.
Hello, art heads and culture commandos. It's James Comrie, half-assed reporter, and we are in Chelsea today. We're going to run into the Gagosian gallery and we're going to see if we can get some pictures of a wonderful William de Kooning show titled Endless Painting. Stay tuned. Okay, well, I was told I can do some photography here. Well, I've got a long history with the Gagosian galleries in my filming, but I think in a case like this is such a museum-grade show that they probably cutting people some slack. Oh boy. Well, this place is packed. There must be at least 50 people in here. This is titled Boudoir 1972. 56 by 48 inches. Well, just in my quick stroll around, I think that they've basically got about at least 3 of his major periods. And I would call this his Long Island period. He was out near Jackson Pollock on Firehouse Road for the last 30 or 40 years of his career. And he was also doing a lot of female paintings. This is another great piece. This is Woman as Landscape, 1954 to 1955, 65 by 49. Well, there was a de Kooning show at the Modern probably about 10 or 12 years ago, and they had a wall of his early Woman series from the early 50s, and I think at that point one of those paintings had sold for $160 million, and I looked at the wall of probably about 6 of them, and I estimated that there was probably nearly $1 billion worth of women paintings. You know, I'm kind of looking at this and thinking that it's almost like he's overlaid another face on top of the woman body, and there's the lips and the mouth and the teeth down here. This is Untitled 14. It's 1986, 77 by 88 inches oil on canvas, and I would say that this would be what I would consider the late period. And I believe that de Kooning passed away in 1994 at the age of, 92, something like that. And at that point, a lot of people were saying that he hadn't really been painting for 4 or 5 years, and that he was suffering from Alzheimer's, dementia, something like that. But other people say no, he was still working, but he had a problem in that he would have to have people start his paintings, and once he would get a few lines down, he could then go on and finish the painting by himself. This is Untitled 14, oil on canvas, 80 by 70 inches. Well, I remember I'd been in New York at that point for probably about 5 years, and well, de Kooning had always been kind of a mythical figure. Had been working with a couple of other galleries, but I think at that point he had some major shows with Fourcade Gallery, Xavier Fourcade, and I believe that was the first time that he started showing these more scraped down canvases. And there was a lot of negative critical response. A lot of people were very used to seeing de Kooning doing a lot of chunky, juicy painting, and these pieces are pretty spare. This is Untitled 5, 1982. This is 80 by 70. One of the things I was going to say about some of these later works is that a lot of people have said that one of the things that was great about de Kooning was that he always wanted to keep the paintings in a relative human scale, and a lot of the abstract expressionists that he was hanging around with, Rothko and all those people, they were always doing huge paintings. And I think someone asked him why did he stay in a painting that's probably about maybe 6 feet on any side, was the largest he was doing, and he was saying because he wanted to be able to reach all the edges of the painting. You know, he didn't paint on the ground, he was an easel painter. I think also the other thing that a lot of people that liked the later scraped down work was that he kind of got back to his drawing, his linear elements, which was one of the things that made his work stand out in the 40s. This is Woman on a Sign 2, 1967. This is oil on paper mounted on canvas, 56 by 41 inches. So this goes back to what I was talking about with the female figures. It's kind of the Montauk paintings, the Firehouse Road paintings, the Hamptons paintings. I think the other thing that's interesting is that a lot of people asked de Kooning what his painting medium was, and one of the things that he was doing since the early 50s was he was making a kind of egg emulsion that he used, and a lot of people say that's why he was able to get such a slippery effect with the brush strokes. So, and other people joked that it was like mayonnaise because it was basically, I think it was egg whites and linseed oil. Bill/Lee's Delight, 1946. This is oil on paper mounted on masonite. Okay, so this is one of the earlier pieces in the show. And I was talking about his line work, and you really can see the the lines, there's a lot of charcoal in there. And I was going to say, this actually looks kind of scraped down as well. I've read a lot of art history. I think there's a book that came out about de Kooning 15 or 20 years ago that was very important. One of the points that they make is that he was a very good friend with Arshel Gorky. There's kind of some eyes in there. And people were saying that maybe his line work owes a certain amount to Gorky's influence. I was just down in DC about 5 or 6 months ago and got to see another piece from this period. It was called Pink Angel. This is untitled, 1975-1979, oil on canvas, 69 by 80. So this is kind of halfway between his juicy Long Island women paintings and some of the landscape paintings he did out there, and the part where he started to scrape down a lot more.
I hear what you're saying, you feel, but that's like, yeah, you can't.
I do remember driving out around Firehouse Road and going by and visiting his studio maybe 10 years ago. And at that point, his daughter was still alive and was living in the studio. And she was an animal rights advocate, and she had a bunch of miniature ponies in corrals in front of the studio. And well, it was kind of a great afternoon thing to be sitting there looking at a bunch of miniature ponies sauntering around in the corral in front of the de Kooning studio and being able to see some of his paintings through the windows. Let's go into the main gallery. Okay, let's take a look at this huge sculpture. They're calling this Standing Figure, 1969 to 1984. Bronze, 148 by 252 by 80. Well, I would say that this is probably the largest de Kooning that I've ever seen. And they were saying that it took them 15 years to get this finished. I know that we'll probably see later on another sculpture from his Clam Digger series. Okay, well, I just got the word I cannot continue with my camera, that if I want to keep working on my phone, I can do that. But like I said, I knew that there would be some problems. We'll see if we can get something on the phone. Okay, well, that was wonderful. The head security guy came over and he said, I had to check on this, but you can use your camera, my Sony SRX. This is the Bathers, 1967. Oil and paper mounted on canvas. I just talked to the head security guy. He said that it was fine if I used the camera. You can go ask him. He just came and talked to me like 2 minutes ago. Thank you. It's 32 by 26, as I said. I've had a long history with Gagosian gallery and the question of videoing. I think one of the things I noticed, we were talking about the works on paper, and we went and saw George Condo's show. about a month ago, and a lot of his work was on paper, mounted on canvas. It's untitled 22, 1983. Well, I think not only was de Kooning skimming down the surface, but he was also paring down his palette. And yeah, there was a whole number of works for many years that were just the black, white, red, and blue. This is 70 by 80. And I think that that's about as big as, I mean, maybe he did a backdrop for a theater production or something that was larger, but this is about as large as he ever got in the studio paintings. This is Whose Name Was Writ in Water, 1975, 76 by 87. Okay, so I would consider this a, I don't know, a landscape maybe? Maybe it's a figure in a landscape. And I think one of the interesting things is that you can see that de Kooning rotated this. You can see the splashes kind of coming out, and then he flipped it on its side and kept painting. I think for a lot of people, this is their favorite period, because he is splashing the paint, slathering the paint on. I've often thought I might like to try some of the egg emulsion at some point. I've just never gotten around to it. Okay, so he's got some brush strokes in there. Gosh, I don't know if he ever used a knife. Maybe, maybe not. Oh, this is a beautiful piece. Untitled 10, 1985. 70 by 80 inches. Okay, so he's reduced it down to just the red, yellow, and blue, but then he's added in this aqua green that adds a lot. And if we get a little closer, and they're warning me not to get too close, you can see that the white sections actually have several layers that he's built up. You can sort of read some of the pedimenti in there. And that red form almost has the sense of a letter. It's one of the very nice late pieces. Oh, this is a classic. This is Suburb in Havana, 1958, oil on canvas, 80 by 70 inches. Well, as I was saying, there are at least 3 different periods. This is probably more like 5 or 6. I think this is one of the very good paintings. I think this is also a landscape, but you can see that he was also influenced by Franz Kline and his kind of slashing action painting technique. Also, I have to say that I like the way that this painting is aged. Oh, there's some crackle. But I like the more toned down, darker aspect of this. This is Milkmaid, Untitled 10, 1984, 77 by 88 inches. I guess you could probably go back in the files and find another de Kooning show at Gagosian where I was able to slip in and sort of do a lot of work on the down low. And I believe that most of that show was the late work, the very pared down work. But you can still get his sense of his kind of whiplash lines. It's kind of interesting to think how he started out as a very academic figure painter, mostly dealing with sharp lines and graphically delineating forms, and then he got chunkier and chunkier, and then at some point he just started to scrape everything down more and more and more. This is Landscape of an Armchair, 1971, oil on canvas. And again, I think a lot of these are kind of a mixture of landscape and figure painting. So I have another theory I should probably run past you. De Kooning spent a lot of time, well, not only him, but all the abstract expressionists spent a lot of time trying to erase all kinds of figurative elements. They wanted to break into pure abstraction. And so with Jackson Pollock and his Oliver paintings, and Clifford Still with his kind of flame forms, and Rothko with his rectangles, by about 1950, the whole abstract expressionist thing had kind of totally broken out of the figurative constraints. And at that point, it was kind of like I got a little avant-garde, a little cadre that were kind of militaristic about not having any figurative elements. And then Jean Dubuffet, French artist, came to America, stayed in New York for 6 or 7 months, went out to Chicago, made some lectures. I think Cal Soldenberg and some other people saw them. And I think a lot of the, at least Pollock and de Kooning, were aware that Dubuffet was kind of breaking into some new territory with an abstract, figurative thing. This is Woman Green, 1952-55, oil and charcoal and canvas, 30 by 23. Well, back to the Dubuffet and the reintroduction of figurative elements. So, within a year or two after Dubuffet came to New York and kind of rattled everybody's cage, and also, I think, justified the whole long tradition of figurative painting, both de Kooning and Jackson Pollock started to reintroduce figures into the works. I'll tell you what, if there was a painting that I could take under my arm on my bicycle, take it home, this would be the one. This is a beauty. This is Montauk, 1969, oil on paper mounted on canvas. And again, we got the painting kind of two pieces of paper glued together with a seam. And then you've got the juicy paint on top of that. As I was saying, I think one of the things that de Kooning loved about his painting was he wanted everything to be slippery and slidey, and he was very much someone that was into the slick surface, the oiled surface, almost as if he was maybe rubbing suntan oil on somebody. Oh, that's interesting. Looks like he's got some paper towel texture in there. Also, there's something I haven't noticed before, and that is that some of these passages, especially some of the more early passages, are pretty matte, which means that he was using some solvent to thin down the paint. This is Untitled 1976, 77 by 88 inches. You know, another thing is that de Kooning always uses these kind of fleshy pink colors. So there's always a kind of a crossover between things that might be figurative, or that might be the color of a sunset, or maybe even sunlight on beach sand. Okay, I'm going to try to go slow so that you can see the quality. We do have some puckering here. Oh, he's done some smushing. So a lot of this is almost pastel. Light yellows, creamy pinks, light aqua. Going into the home stretch. Woman in a Garden, 1971, 72 by 36. There's also oil on paper on canvas. I was talking about his paint and his various mediums and things, and I think at some point he actually made the statement that the reason people invented oil paint was so they could paint figures, paint flesh, paint the body. People are going to complain and say I'm moving the camera too fast, but I mean, realistically, you could spend 20 minutes in front of each one of these paintings and never get everything you'd like to. No Title, 1978, 60 by 54.
Like multiple camera shots.
I have the world's most popular art blog. I've got thousands and thousands of subscribers. No Title, 1978. 60 by 54 inches. Well, I think not only did de Kooning kind of go through phases where he was doing different things with his mediums and scraping and not scraping, but he also kind of went into trends, repeating his palettes a lot. I'm just saying this is oil on canvas. But again, we've got our slashy strokes, and we've got some drips and splashes. So I was going to say, I often think about what's the perfect size for an oil painting. And 60 by 54, so you're talking 5 by 4.5. That looks about right to me. So this might be the oldest piece in the show. This is Figure, 1944, oil and graphite on masonite, 19 by 16 inches. Well, I was down at the guess maybe it was the National Gallery. Maybe it was the Smithsonian, one of the great galleries in Washington, D.C., and they had a couple of de Kooning's early drawing periods I was talking about, his being influenced by Gorky. And if you're familiar with Gorky's work, he did a couple of portraits of he and his mother taken from a photograph, and that was really one of the icons of that period when they were transitioning from, I guess, Cubism and Surrealism into something more approaching abstract expressionism. But again, you know, right from the beginning, he's using his pinks, his lines. You could take this apart, chop it up, take the lines and lay them out in various ways, and you would end up with one of the paintings from the 90s. Okay, so this is one of the clam diggers. I think I was a kid in college and was looking at Art in America and Art Forum magazines, and they had several articles about his clam digger series. I guess that's a little shovel he's got there. I think he's also influenced a lot of people. I think Dana Schutz and some of her sculpture owe a lot to this kind of work. The Moraine, 1947. Oil on paper mounted on wood. Well, we're going to finish up looking at this piece. I actually love this period. It's like his black and white period. And a lot has been made out of the fact that de Kooning was a professional house painter, and that's how he supported himself for many years. And also, he was a very prolific painter, but he couldn't afford to buy a lot of oil paint. And if you look at the way that he's painted, he probably went through thousands of dollars worth of oil paint every month. But during this period, he was using house painting enamel. And I know that de Kooning had a studio down on 10th Street and was so influential that it ended up becoming an artist strip and was one of the first places where they had artist-run galleries, co-op galleries. And de Kooning was kind of the godfather of what's been known as the 10th Street touch. I was going to say, when he started doing the figures again, he and Pollock, Clement Greenberg kind of denounced him. He'd said that he was a great painter, maybe one of the greatest painters of his age, and then when he started putting the figures back in, Greenberg was a iconoclast, I guess. And I guess for the rest of his critical career, he kind of thought that de Kooning backed down. James Kalm reporting on William de Kooning, endless painting at Gagosian. You can like this, share, link it up to all your social media sites, and you can share your thoughts, ideas, comments, criticisms, and reviews below. And as we have said for the 19 years we've been producing the Kalm Report, we always say thank you, Kate. And boy, listen to the talk out in the gallery. This place has been mobbed. Thank you, Kate. Oh, that was great. Thank you.